Good afternoon, my lovely friends. Today, there'll be no preambles, nothing like that. We're going to cut straight to the chase with our last episode of My 30-Day World. Rather than the preamble, here's a quick summary. There's a Kickstarter, it finishes in 4 days. If you're interested, go have a look. Links in the description. What they did as part of the Kickstarter, this thing. 30 questions over 30 days. Answer 1 a day, or do what I've done in my case, which is answer 2 over the span of 2 days in order to make it kind of like a dual-sized finale kind of thing. Any case, so the questions that we have today are for the 17th of April, yesterday. What is a legendary relic of power in your world? And for today, the 18th, are the lands cartographed? Where are the boundaries? So originally I was coming up with a very, very basic idea of what a relic of power would be. So I had this big description going on of what a relic was, how it's used, how I use it in my world, and so on and so forth. But then I realized that it was really, really boring because it was dull. It was like 20 minutes long. What I'm going to do today is link these two together because I feel that the greatest relic of power for Talum would be the Cartographer's Guild and the ancient relic that it is based around. Now, those who have heard what I've written all about in the past would understand why a Cartographer's Guild would be so important to a place like Talum and specifically the 5 free cities. But let's assume that this is the first time you've come across this video, and ostensibly, what is the world of Talum? Talum is a world where it's in the deep, dark throes of the late medieval era. It is incredibly, disastrously difficult for people to maintain structured organizational things because people are ultimately still stuck in this old feudalistic mindset of having to survive. They haven't properly constructed the ideal of enlightened self-interest, and really they ultimately go through this continuous cycle of what is the best thing that's going to advance my system of life, and how am I going to kill these people who are going to inevitably turn around and decide that the best way to extend their likelihood of survival is to kill me. Kill in this circumstance is just an overthrow concept. How am I going to subjugate? How am I going to get rid of? How am I going to remove them from my possibilities? As a result, this is really, really just disastrous for a concept of sustainable society. However, there are certain bits of brightness in the world. And one of those bits of brightness, from an outsider's point of view, from the idea that things on the whole are kind of progressing and getting a bit better, is the Cartographer's Guild. This guild is one of the only ones of its kind that is in every single city. There are, armies, there are merchant collectives, there are hegemonies, there are these different things, but there is generally this one place that not many people would really know about in a kind of very useful to know kind of way, but it would be somewhere that exists in all 5 of the cities. Its deal is trying to map the world, and probably failing catastrophically. Now, this is a monumental task at the best of times. The act of mapping out Europe was something that hadn't been done properly in any real accuracy until well after the Industrial Revolution had actually begun. And here are these old fogey scholars trying to do it in the throes of meteorological catastrophes, weather patterns that destroy things, places where humanity has not reached. And you also have the fact that, fantasy exists. So there are actually going to be areas that are full of destructive, magical things. There'll be people who don't want to be cartographed. There'll be people who do want to be cartographed, but they want to be done as their position. Treaties will rise and fall, and all the way through there are these people who are trying to create an independent version of what the world should look like. And the world just keeps changing. Now, interestingly, the Cartographer's Guild is actually a very old institution in Talum. It's been in the game since almost the first session. one of the first NPCs that the players were able to kind of interact with on a, at least a neutral positioning was a cartographer, was one of this guild. And the reason that I really wanted to put that forward was, yet again, this kind of idea of making everything a bit more balanced, making things not all doom and gloom. When I was younger and developing these sessions, I was including a lot of very, very harsh house rules, really developing myself into, a doom and gloom type dude. I was all about the melodrama and the visceral description of how you get your guts torn out with a knife kind of thing. Introducing cartography and the concept of a cartographer's guild really was a tacit admission that there were people in the world who did not have an FYGM attitude. These people who were really working towards, as I said before, this grander ideal than just the betterment of their own survival. As time has gone on and I've developed the idea more and more, I've really developed the idea into something that's a bit more real to the world, or at least real to how they would exist. Cartographers are essentially monks. They are essentially the people who cloister themselves away and send out runners in survey expeditions, basically, sending people out in effort to find out certain areas. They are definitively apolitical animals in a world that is very political in its devices. They refuse to kind of recognize any particular king over another in an effort to be as neutral as possible. And realistically, being able to map out the world, being able to show that the world can be accurately put down, is very powerful to a world where there is very little certainty about the world. And this has worked so far. Ironically, every time I've introduced the Cartographer's Guild, they have actually already fallen from this high plinth of what they're trying to achieve. And that was because of the structure of what the game is. Ultimately, my philosophy of the game is everything that I've set down here or elsewhere or in-game does not matter as long as they are not introduced in the world itself. And, well, I'm not interested in introducing the world itself as this solid, immutable thing. One of the main ideas of role-playing games is that the players will change things, but in the same way, I will change things according to how the setting, world, and the campaign should be. So, how does this actually play out in the end? Why did I come up with it? And I'll show you right now. So, what you see right here is the Adventurer's Vault. This is from Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, which, as I've said before, Talum is from this era of Dungeons & Dragons. It's moved on from there and actually has changed immensely since then, but really it was very much the 4th edition kind of idea. Now, what it ultimately comes down to is how I came across my favourite magic item in the game. And I happen to remember it offhand, 78. I got it wrong by 1. Okay, this right here is my favourite magic item in the entirety of Dungeons & Dragons. It is the Map of Unseen Lands. Now, when I first played the game, my game master was very, very lucky in that he was able to spend money willy-nilly, and as a result, he got a lot of the 4th edition books. He also was very, very, shall we say, stingy in relation to his world information, like the world building and what really made the world work and stuff like that. As a result, he let me read through this book, basically whenever I wanted to. He also let me read through the first Adventurer's Vault, which happens to be right there. And he also let me read through his Draconomicon, which was an atrocious book, and I didn't really like it that much. But in any case, this is the place where I really got involved in Dungeons & Dragons. Reading through the different wondrous items, the basis of these wondrous items are supposed to be that they are big relics. They are things that are remnants of the olden days. Well, the Map of Unseen Land seems to be the strongest relic ever, because it's a Google Maps. It is Google Maps for Dungeons and Dragons. And it really is fantastic. And I hooked onto it, and I kind of became a bit not so about it. My character became obsessed with making a cartographer's guild. He was very, very much obsessed with finding out where the world was and making sure that everything was fixed down and stuff, and it really did change things. Now, this idea, this concept of fixing down the world, of exploring it, really did strike me as an important thing to come up with in Talum. I will be bringing it up later on, but one of the immediate themes that I wanted to come up about was Talum is untamed. It is largely unexplored. But I also wanted this map to exist. So how did I do that? Well, I did it by doing this. This is something that I wrote up, and I think I'll make it a bit bigger. There we are. Now, this is generally how I treat magic items in my game. They are either made of a material that is very special, or it is something that is vaunted and loved by the people of Talum. And this is called the Cartographer's Artifact. Oh, sorry, the Cartographer's Archetype. The Cartographer's Archetype is a work of art that depicts the land in all its detail. So powerful are its depictions that all but the most fallow of heart will weep at the sight of something so beautiful. A pity then that the old parchment holds within an incomplete image, and the world has moved on from its vaunted visage. It is the hope of myself and those others of my guild that it should one day be re-empowered again with the true epigraph of its namesake, Talum. This is where people inside the world know what Talum is called. They wouldn't recognise it otherwise. Why would they call it Talum? Why would the world be called Talum? It's because someone once called it that. In the same way that we believe in the Platonic world of forms, even though we don't really think about it. We know that Plato called it forms. We know that Socrates called it, well, he called it ideals, but yeah. And that's kind of the big thing. That's kind of the big important thing. So in any case, I shall turn this off because boop, it doesn't matter anymore. The ultimate point of this is when other people in this game would want to list like relics, they would want to say that it is a relic of the time, it is a relic of the world, and it's got magic and it's empowered. Relics are ultimately keepsakes of an olden year. It's an olden time. It's an olden belief. And giving them power kind of detracts from the idea of them being old, I think. They should have some kind of transcendental ability, but I think the transcendental power should be entirely social, or at least human created. Who knows? So that is the end of my time, and that is the end of the 30-day world challenge for me. I hope you did enjoy it, and those others who were taking part, I really enjoyed reading through your stuff. I want to give little shout outs to different people like RP Gamer, who was fantastic and really, really useful for getting involved. Devay Breon Jackson, who was fantastically nice to me. And the lovely world of Tahun, who I gave D20 advice a lot of surprises with that. But still, I do hope he enjoyed me in completely gate crashing his streams and stuff like that. I would like to actually say that this is not the end. I'm going to be continuing something like this, but it's not going to be in the form that you have right now. While it's been very good and a very, very constructive thing to imagine the world in the way that we have it here, it ultimately does not strike me as the best way to do it, just to continuously answer this, because ultimately my utility overcomes my world building. And what does that mean? That basically means if I can't use it properly in the present time, I forget it very, very quickly. This, the Cartographer's Archetype, is actually going to be used in my game. It is actually an ideal concept, a theme that one day may come up, but I don't actually know. In all cases, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be that I'm going to continue this, not really talking in terms of generalized advice, but more in specific how I have done the following things, kind of a step-by-step of how I would do things. I'm also going to be giving a try to the idea of using Google Hangouts and stuff like that. I hope that that's going to work out, but, you know. I'm also going to be branching out from role-playing games only. I have a lot more to say about different things, and if any of you have been on my Twitter, you'll actually see what some of that is. And yeah, that's going to be my gig. I do hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the bits of comments and love that I've received from everywhere. Thanks very much, guys. Ciao.